is Ruel's Running Podcast, a podcast about running, health, family, play, and an NSNG lifestyle. And now, here's your host, Ruel.
Excuse me as I rock on. That's Went Away by Dorothy Lane. Dorothy Lane out of Martinez, California. That's out of the Cut and Dry album. Check them out at dorothylanemusic.com. Yeah. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. It's Ruel Abadan. What's going on? How's it going? If you are a new listener, this is Ruel's Running Podcast, my podcast, a podcast about running and health and family, play, living a NSNG lifestyle, for the most part, just everything in my world. And time to time I'll have a guest, and time to time I'll be a guest, and that's the podcast. Thanks for sticking around. Enjoy the show. So I wanted to cover some stuff, and before I do, I wanted to make sure that before you go out on your run today, tomorrow, you want to be able to fuel your body. And how do you fuel your body? You take a fuel pump and shove it up your rear and pick your octane of choice, and you just pump your rear end with some good old-fashioned gasoline. No, not really. You fuel yourself by eating. And how you eat, what you eat, will fuel you. And so that's just my retarded way of going around and saying, what's cooking, yo? What the heck is cooking? So yes, food for the run, food for life. It's all the same thing, isn't it? Before I hop into that, I just want to talk about do an update. Last podcast episode, I talked about doing a long run, and for a birthday run, and it was to be a birthday run that if I had enough time in the day to pull off 45 miles to cover the 45 years I've been on God's green earth, then how cool would that be? So I did the long run, and I did not do 45 miles. I did 26. Yay! And that was my longest mile run since the Aloni 50K back in, when was that, guys? Was that May? So, yeah. I did that. And on the topic of food, how I fueled for that basically was I did nothing different the day before. I did nothing different the night before. For those who have followed this podcast for a long time know how I operate, sort of the fat-adapted because of the engineered foods, but sort of fat-adapted, right? So that means I'm not going to carry so much of the goos and rely on the Gatorades and all that good stuff. Not good stuff, but the sugary stuff, the crap, the garbage. So the reason why, and that explains why I just don't do anything different the night before a run, even if it's an event. I don't do anything different, and I start the waking morning with. I started the waking morning with, a cup of coffee with a splash of heavy cream. And that was how I got started as far as fueling. I have on board, whatever's on my body as fuel, and I have the fat in the heavy cream working for me to sort of get me going. But as far as what I packed on the run, so I'm just going to go right into what I packed and prepared for the run, for the 26-mile birthday run. I had some raw almonds in a Ziploc bag. I had some electrolyte capsules in another Ziploc bag. And excuse me while I try to navigate into the next lane and not smash into another car. Let's go see if people can be courteous. Okay. Don't you try to not cross the line of driving too radical and aggressive and come across a douche. So that was it. So yeah, I'm driving and I'm trying to cover the topic of food. And as I talk about having coffee and heavy cream, my driving is going to get me to Starbucks so that I can get me one of those coffee and creams. So I pack the nuts, I pack the salt caps, I take a handheld water bottle and I put like 5 scoops of the UCAN Superstarch plain into the handheld, and I put water and I shake it up, and that's sort of my concentrated solution of the superstarch. So that's why it's not NSNG, because technically it's corn. It's a corn starch, and that's grain. So, but for the long runs, I typically have that sort of solution in hand. Why I put 5 scoops? It was about, I think the idea was a scoop per serving, and I'd want to trickle that in every couple hours or something, or at least starting after a couple hours. So that's that. I carry water, and I picked up 3 Epic bars. The store that I went to only had the turkey, so I picked up the turkey, and I picked up an alternative meat bar, which is the what was it, Tatanka bars or something like that. So they were bison bars, and it's like, okay, we'll see how this goes. So I had meat bars, I had nuts, I had salt caps, and I had the superstarch solution, and I had water. And that was the food. That was the nutrition. I was thinking I'd spend maybe 12 hours out on the run. I got up at 4:30 and made my coffee and started working on the coffee. So when I finally got around to running, when I finally got past the 2-hour mark, at some point I just started trickling some of that superstarch, which I also had a meat bar, so I was covering both solid and liquid forms of fuel, and had that. That's my fuel on the run. But and if you've heard other podcasts of me doing these long runs, these attempts, these solo run attempts, I basically packed the same thing. Some runs in the past I've packed olives, jarred olives, and and sometimes I'd pack like a little roll of lightsabers. I would shove a lightsaber down my throat. Lifesavers, candies, hard candies. And then there's a reason for that. For the strategic use of sugar, sort of a sugar trickle. But yeah, that was run-related food. Non-run related, had a bunch of stuff cooking up. The typical smoothies I'll do in the morning. I had to do a smoothie for myself after the run, only because I think I had, because of a lack of sleep, because of the heat, and for whatever else, I ended up getting a migraine, and I like treating my migraines with green smoothies, so I basically made myself a kale shake. Had some berries in there and some nuts, some coconut milk, and a little bit of cinnamon, a carrot, a celery, and that was that. So it's technically not a kale shake. It's a shake that contains kale, but it's not the only thing in there. And ice and some water, and that was that. I worked through that. That was like a big old Vitamix pitcher of smoothie, which ended up being about 3 tall glasses. So over the course of over the period of the post run, I was slowly working my way through this shake. The migraine didn't happen immediately. After the run, I got dressed down and changed, and I went with the family to what's called Gilroy Gardens, and they're like a theme park, amusement park type thing. I've talked about them before, but recently they have a petting zoo, and we wanted to take the kids there to see the animals. And it was while I was with my kids in the big hen house, if you will. It's a big old kind of circular structure with chicken wire and stuff, so that a bunch of people can go in and see the chickens, and it feels like they're roaming around free. But yeah, something just hit me, and my migraines, the visual aura that is associated with the onset of my migraines, started to kick in. And so it didn't prevent us from enjoying time at Gilroy Gardens, but we were only there for about an hour and a half until they closed. We didn't need to do anything else. We left and had dinner somewhere, and then at that point, I was feeling kind of on and off better, and had to get my wife to drive the rest of the way home. But got home, and that's when I had that smoothie. And I don't drink them as much as I used to. And when I get my migraines, I think that I'm not sort of balanced enough internally with my lifestyle that I could stand to benefit from a good veg and berry smoothie once in a while. So did that. I do it. I make them every week, at least a couple times a week for my wife. And I don't dip into the batch of smoothies I make for her, because hers, I put a banana in hers, and to get your mind out of the gutter. I don't want the banana in mine. I don't want that banana in mine. So what else was going on? Some good old broth. I started adding some broth back into my meals. I make the broth regularly, as I've talked about in the past, primarily to help make soups for my wife and for her to enjoy. But again, it's one of those things where I get a migraine and I figure I'm off. I need to add back some healthy options to how I fuel and how I go my day to day. And what else has been going on? Good old eggs and bacon and steak. I had some leftover steak from a dish that I made for everybody else, but for whatever reason, everybody else had other things to eat, so I had to be the guy eating up this steak, which is, I'm not going to complain, except that the steak dish has the steak sort of marinated with a little bit of coconut aminos, and which it's an alternative to soy sauce, because it doesn't have the gluten or the wheat which can be found in conventional soy sauce. But the coconut aminos has sugar, so yeah, it wasn't a whole lot, but you just smear some of that on the meat, and you have it sit for a while overnight, and cook the thing up with some onions and garlic. So it was a nice thing of steak, but I had leftovers to eat. And what I'll do is I'll get a couple strips of bacon and put it on a hot iron pan, and then I'll put an egg on the pan, and then I'll take a slice of the leftover steak and I'll put it in the pan as well. And what I'll basically do is I'll wait for the egg to get as good as I like it, and that'll be when I know it's time for me to eat everything in that pan. And some of you might be thinking, well, I would wait for the bacon, but I can actually eat the bacon right out of the package, and it's delicious. So I'm basically just warming up the bacon strips in the pan, waiting for the egg to cook. And it doesn't matter whether the bacon gets just warm or super crisp, I'll eat it. So, this way I'm just having a nice, soft, sunny side up egg with some warmed, chewy bacon. Some would argue it's raw. And some warmed up leftover steak, marinated steak with some onions and garlic. And that's what I've been doing. But as incredible as that might not sound, very recently I just been in this kick of, I'm going to tighten up my nutrition, and I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to say it here, and just as soon as I turn off the mic, I'm going to screw things up. But I went to the store. I picked up a couple slices of ribeye steaks, nice size steaks. They were about 20. They weren't like the pristine, grass-fed, grass-finished, variety of ribeye steaks, but they didn't have any, so I went for whatever I got. They were about $9-10. There were 2 steaks in the package, so they were $9-10 each. So I spent about $20 for the package of steaks, and I took them home, and I used my phone to pick up a recipe on how the heck I could cook these ribeye steaks using a cast iron pan, because I've never done it before. I've cooked the rib. The rib roast, the standing rib roast in the oven. I've done that and cut out some nice ribeye cuts off of the roast. But these were already like an 1.5 inch steaks, ribeye steaks. Didn't know what to do with it. So this is what I did. Found a recipe online. Thought it was cool. I preheated the oven up to 500 degrees, and I put the cast iron pan in there, dry pan, and waited for the oven and the pan to get like super duper hot. While that's heating up, I had the steaks out, trying to get them to room temp as much as possible. They were a little bit cool coming from the supermarket. So I took them out, and we skipped some rope together, and we did some ballroom dancing, some light dancing, and managed to get those ribeye steaks to a good room temp. And then I seasoned them up really, really, really good with the coarse kosher salt, a lot of salt, both sides, cracked black pepper on both sides, and then I took the pan and I put it on the stove, on a hot stove, for a couple minutes so the pan's already hot, but I want to pick up maintain heat and to a level where I'm going to throw one of these steaks on top of that dry pan and hope to get 30 seconds on one side, 30 seconds on another side to get a nice sort of brown crust. And then after 30 seconds on each side, I'd stick the pan back into the oven, which is still holding at 500 degrees, and I'll do 2 to 3 minutes in the oven, and then I'll flip the steak in the pan in the oven for another 2 to 3 minutes on the other side. Then that's pretty much done. Pull the steak out, put it out to rest on a carving board, covered lightly with some tin foil, and let that rest for about 2 minutes. And I did 2 of those, and so delicious. While that had been going on, I took some broccoli, and I steamed it for about 10 minutes. Get a good steam on some broccoli. Set the broccoli aside on a dish. Use the same pot that I used to steam the broccoli. I dump out any liquid, and I just pour in a bunch of olive oil in there and some finely chopped garlic, and I sort of let the garlic kind of infuse with the heated olive oil, and I've got garlic olive oil, and I'll drizzle all of that garlic and olive oil on over the steamed broccoli in that dish. And I'll get some. It has to be the sea salt this time, right? Get some sea salt, and I'll sprinkle sea salt over that broccoli, and some fresh cracked pepper, and it's good. The broccoli and the olive oil and the garlic is good, but something about the saltiness from that sea salt, just a little bit of it, just makes it pop. So good. So the steaks are resting, and now this broccoli is done, and I ate one of the steaks last night with half of the broccoli, and it was so good. I could have done a better job at getting the crust on the steak, but I don't care. I got the steaks done to say medium, and I almost. Oh my goodness! I was almost say I was good before I finished that first steak. And I knew that I was going to save the second steak, but I muscled through and I finished a whole single steak. To me, visually, I'm thinking, that's not a lot of steak, but the thing is, it's steak. It's not like you can power through easily a loaf of bread with some butter like nothing, but then this is steak, man. If your body's if your body can send you the right signals, you'll know when you're done. And man, it was good. So I have another steak and some more broccoli waiting for me at home to enjoy later on. But that's what's been cooking. And for those who have been tuned in, expecting to hear a whole lot about running, I don't talk a whole lot about running. I do talk about running, but this is the food part about the running and living that I wanted to cover. And I'll pick up in a bit more about the birthday run and other things that have gone on. So yeah. BeMighty.com. Play your Spotify music on the go without a phone or internet connection. Mighty. Folks, I picked up a Mighty a while ago from the good folks at Mighty to test out, try out. It really, really, really reminded me of some other device that I used on the go. And you should check it out. It plays Spotify playlists and podcasts, and it works with Bluetooth and wired headphones. It stores more than 1,000 tracks offline with up to 5 hours of listening time. And there's wireless syncing involved through a mobile app, and it's drop-proof and water-resistant. Check them out. It's a little tiny device, and you can listen to your Spotify music and your Spotify podcasts, and you don't have to carry your phone once you've got it all synced. You can just have this little thing. It's about an inch and a half or so by inch and a half square. And check them out at ruwellsrunning.com/partners. Click on the Mighty link and see what they got. They come in 3 colors. They come in black, white, and orange. Check them out. ruwellsrunning.com/partners for Mighty Audio. Be mighty. I want to give a shout out to a couple of fellas. I want to give a shout out to Shishir. I work with Shishir, and Shashir has a brother in England, Bibhash. Want to give a shout out to Bibhash. Bibhash completed a fast, in my mind, a fast 50K, and I connected with Bibhash via Shashir, chatting about running and podcasts and things of that nature. And want to congratulate Bibhash on his completing his 50K, which was an improvement from his previous attempt by several hours. So that's fantastic. Bibhash, from what I understand, you've caught on the ultra bug, and I want to wish you best on all of your ultra adventures, and would love to hear about them as they happen. I know you've invited me over to where you're at, to events over at where you're at, but that ain't gonna happen. I ain't gonna fly across the pond to do a run. As much as I would love to, I just don't have that going on in my life. Got family to take care of here, so I gotta just sort of fit running into other things that I do, just as I'm sure you do. So yeah, just want to take a brief moment to give a shout out to Shashir and Bibhash. Awesome guys. If anybody wants to know, I know, let's see, it was what was it? I'm going through notes. What was it, dude? It was the Hell on the Humber. Hell on the Humber. If anybody's listening who's familiar with Hell on the Humber, that's what Bibhash had completed. Yeah, awesome. He went from 9 hours on a previous attempt, and he recently completed 6 hours. So I don't know if it was the same event, but either way, congrats, and looking forward to hear about your upcoming events. I know you had talked about doing what's called a White Rose Ultra in November, and that you were gunning for the 60 miles. So I know I talked about you having big balls, and that still stands, because they're so big that they literally can stand on their own. All right. So I want to pick up where I left off. Where did I leave off? Where in the world did I leave off? I do have some things noted that I was referencing. Then they went away. Thinking. Anyways, it's another day. I'm sitting down to continue on the recording, and that's just how it goes. So that's peeling back the curtain. That's blowing away the illusion of anything great that's happening here. So I don't know about you guys, but I tend to leave notes on my notes app on my phone. And the great thing about that is I could just use the search bar, right? And find stuff. And like I did a search for runs, and it was what I have are notes from back in February of the runs that I wanted to hit on each quarter of the year. And so I have for Q1, I wrote down Red Tail Ridge 50K on the 17th of February. I did that. Had a blast. I did do it, right? Yeah, I did. I did do it. I'm trying to remember how I finished the dang thing. I think I finished it with that after the cutoff. No, is that? I don't really know. All I know is I came dead last. Then Q2 was the Ohlone 50K. That was on the 20th of May. That one I had a blast. Unofficial dead last. So I didn't meet the cutoff, the 10-hour cutoff, but I had a blast. For Q3, I did this. I originally jotted down Berkeley Trail Adventure 50K. That's on the 22nd, and then sometime after, I jotted down Headlands 100, but there's a 50-miler, and that's on the 1st of September. So I think when I jotted that down, I was thinking, what if I just sought out a 50-miler on that in September instead. And I think the idea was, depending on how I did in May at the Ohlone 50K, how I felt and how I did, I'd decide on abandoning the Berkeley Trail 50K and signing up for a 50-miler at Headlands, which is supposed to be really popular, and that's awesome. But that's not going to happen. But what I've done since is I've signed up for the 50-miler in December, the Fat Ass, the Hunter S. Thompson Fear and Loathing. I'm going to give that a go, and I'm holding on to the Berkeley Trail Adventure on the 22nd. So that's a couple weeks from now, sort of, from this recording. No illusion. I'm sitting here. It is now the 31st of August. So tomorrow is Headlands, and I haven't signed up for that, and I'm not going to sign up for that. But the Berkeley Trail Adventure on the calendar for the 22nd has been mentioned this morning between my wife and I. I thought she was going to have an issue with it on the calendar, but she was aware of it. And then she said, oh, never mind. Whatever she had been thinking, she was thinking, and she blew it off. And so don't think there's an issue, but I do have to register. So today, I'll register for the dang thing, and look forward to that. For Q4, I've got that early December 50-mile run registered already. So that's me being sidetracked on trying to find out my notes. So basically what I'm looking for, and I guess I don't need the notes, is I wanted to talk about the birthday run. The birthday run happened on the following Sunday on the week of my birthday. And the original idea was to run 45 miles. It wasn't the goal. It wasn't the objective. It was depending on how the day rolled, depending how timing was. If I could pull off as many loops as I can to get close to 45, that's what I was going to operate off of. So when I threw that out a few weeks back, I was in contact with a friend, Gabriella Popst, and we were just chatting about running and trying to get her on as a guest on the podcast. I should get her on this podcast as well, but the main goal is to get her on the other podcast, the Ultra Diner. And she brought up the idea of maybe we should just go for a walk or a hike or a run and sort of catch up before we sit down and do a podcast. So that got me thinking, well, and she brought up the fact that it was a year ago on the day that I'm planning to do a birthday run that we first met at Mount Diablo, the Diablo Trail Adventure, organized by Coastal Trail folks, so she said she wasn't going to be doing it, and I wasn't going to be doing it. So I said, well, what I will be doing is a long run. She's like, ooh, what event? I'm like, well, it's not an event. It's just me doing these 8-mile loops from home just to celebrate my birthday. And she's like, I'll join you. I have something to do later that day, but I'll join you for a few miles. I'm like, cool, that's awesome. I mean, I've ran with folks before, but I've never sort of scheduled to run with anybody else for these solo runs, these solo long runs. So it was new for me. It was cool. She'd be driving up from San Jose to meet me in San Ramon, and so like, cool. I mean, we should be good for one loop. Then she can, go on for the rest of her day. She has to meet up with family and whatnot. So that's sort of how that was. My thought was, I'd probably want to do like between a 4:30 and a 5 start, just because all of these dumb solo missions that I've done generally were around that time. And so it was just, the night before, just throwing some gear aside. And I had a cooler chest with a bag of ice in it, just in case I needed it. So I had to quickly put together some stuff so that I would have my own aid station at home. So the idea was I'd run a loop, head home. I'd run a loop starting from home and at home to complete the loop, and that would be 8 miles, and then head back out, fully aware that the fact that I was heading home after each loop could be a problem as far as, me not wanting to continue to bail out early. So I told my wife, like, I'm going to set up my own little aid thing here at the front of the house, and if you guys see me, make sure that I don't stick around too long, just kick me out. And so yeah, what stuff that I packed in that cooler was just a little bottle of cold brew coffee from Pete's, and a jug of water, a gallon of water, and the ice. That was it. Aside from that, I got my very first drop bag as swag from the Atlanta 50K. And so I had that set aside, and what I threw in there was a bottle of electrolyte capsules, a Ziploc bag of a bunch of meat bars, and what else? I had a phone charger just in case I was out long enough or my phone started to die and I needed to keep it charged in case I wanted to do stuff with it. But I kept that all in the drop bag and off to the side of the cooler. So morning of the run, I get up and just got ready, and I didn't. It was. Oh, I also had the Hydro Pack set aside, the Nathan pack, and that has like 2 liters, a 2-liter bladder. I filled it up with water, and I set that aside as well. I wasn't going to start the first loop with a pack. I was going to start the first loop without anything but just the coffee that I started with in the morning. I got up at around 4 and got ready, got my coffee, that whole deal, and was messaging back and forth with Gabriella about her arrival, and there was a little bit of a delay, but I wasn't stressing out about it. There was a misunderstanding of how long it would take to get from her place to mine, and it was just only a difference of, I don't know, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, so not a big deal. So I ended up getting ready, and I hung out outside the house, kind of a little cold, but I had my coffee with me, and I had a light shell jacket on. And when she arrived, so happy to see her. It was around a little after 5, and it was cool. I mean, I hadn't seen her since. It was a year since last meeting up with her, and we've been messaging back and forth over the course of that year, and over the course of that year, I've watched her post things about her training, out in the wilderness, or doing some tire pulls, and her posts on getting accepted for Badwater 135, and tons of posts from her crew and her family of her Badwater 135 experience and finish. So it was good, cool seeing her, and we quickly just started our loop after she got whatever she needed out of her car and secured her car. She just parked next to my house, and we were off. And just right from the get-go, we were just catching up, and more stuff from her to catch up on, because there was just so much to talk about, and there was tons of information she shared on the preparation for the Badwater 135, and it's just an amazing story, and it was a good time catching up. And I'm not going to get into her story. The hope is that I'll save that for her to tell when I get her on the Ultra Diner, and But so we did a loop together, and it was her first time in San Ramon, and so she got to tour a bit of it. We made one pit stop in the middle of the loop. It was cool. It was just nice spending time with a friend out on the run early in the morning. And then what happened? We completed the loop. She pulled out something to snack on out of her car, because by that time we completed the loop and we're back at my house. And I figured, okay, this is where we say goodbye, and she heads out, and I just continue on my run. But she was still good to go for another half hour before heading out. So I'm like, cool. So then the idea was we did a small section of a loop, just 15 minutes out and 15 minutes back. So that was approximately 2 miles added to the 8 miles. So we did about 10 miles together. Then we said goodbye, and then I carried on. So at this part of the day, it's starting to warm up, and at this point, without Gabriella, I've put on the Hydro Pack, the Nathan Pack, and so I'm basically putting on, I don't know, 5 pounds of gear. I don't know, maybe I don't know. What's 2 liters of water weigh, folks? And I had a handheld. I forgot how much that holds. I don't know. Maybe it's like 10 pounds. I don't know. Not to make an excuse, but it was a difference, and but big deal, whatever. But I was definitely feeling now my legs are starting to feel heavy, and like whatever. So all that meant was it was a lot of slow and then pick things up, and slow and then pick things up, and a lot of speed walking, and stopping to sort of like assess. It wasn't a race, so I didn't have to like haul ass. But it was that discomfort. It was a level of discomfort where I had to just remind myself, like, yeah, of course it's uncomfortable, because I'm doing another 8-mile loop, idiot. For no reason other than to celebrate the fact that my mom had delivered me into this world, right? And so I did a loop, went back home. Oh, before Gabriella and I parted, my son stepped out of the house and said hello. She got to meet my oldest. No hugs given. I mean, at least for me, I was already stinky after that first loop. But completed a second loop, got home, and got a meat bar added more water to my handheld, the solution of UCAN, and after that second loop, I noticed what my wife had done is she created a chart to track my miles. She just needed to know what my miles were, and it was just super cool to see. It was just a grid from 1 to 45, and she was slashing out the miles. So by the time I finished that second loop, we were looking at, okay, that was 18 miles slashed, and then I went off for a third loop. And, I'm not speedy, and we did start late, so, I started thinking about the day, like, do I really, if I was doing math in my head, and I knew that it was going to take me the whole day to do the 45, and I didn't want to do that, right? I thought, I'd get through past lunch, maybe early afternoon, and I was like working on that third loop, and finishing the third loop got me to mile 26, and I realized, like, you know what, this was a good celebration. I got to catch up with Gabriella. I got a nice round number, 26 completed. I mean, there's no point in me, stressing myself out just trying to put in additional miles. So, by this time, no one was at home when I got to the completion of 3 loops. I rolled open the garage door, and I dragged the cooler out from under the sun and into the garage, and I reached for a folding camping chair. I unfolded it, sat on it, pulled out a meat bar from the bag, the drop bag, and propped my feet on top of sat on the chair, propped my feet up on top of the cooler, and just started munch on a meat bar, and just enjoy the moment. It's awesome. And I texted my wife. She was out with the kids. My oldest son had my kids had a play date. My oldest has a classmate, and he was after mile 1. I noticed that after the second loop, I noticed that the play date had been dropped off by a mom. So, anyways, by the time I finished mile 26, my wife took the kids for some playtime at a park, and so I texted her. I'm like, I finished loop 3. That's 26 miles, and I'm just resting. I didn't say I was done. I just said I was resting. And my wife was basically feeling like, wow, are you really gonna spend the rest of the day just trying to pull off 45 miles? And I told her, no, I'm done. She says, but you said you were resting. I was like, yeah, I'm resting, but I'm done. I'm happy. So what I'll do is I'm just going to finish my bar and take more of a break, and then I'll clean up. And she's like, cool, and I'll meet you at the house. And then we decided that after we all got together, the play date would have been done, and I would have been cleaned up. We would just go to take the kids over to Gilroy Gardens and check out the petting zoo, check out the animals. I'm like, that's awesome, some family time. So that was the birthday run. It sounded, it sounded kind of cool in my head, when I first thought of it. What if I did 45 miles, for my 45th? Knowing full well that, every other solo run that I've done so slow that I've spent a good chunk of the day, that if I was trying to up the miles, it was going to take the whole day, and I really didn't want to do that. I hadn't made the effort to be as fast as I can so that I could cover a lot of distance in in the amount of time that I would be happy with. So, it wasn't going to happen, but that's okay. Got around 26, and then, then we went to the petting zoo, and then I started getting a migraine and all that stuff that I talked about earlier. But, the following day, I felt a little sore, but nothing like my very first marathon, in San Francisco, and, not being able to go up and down stairs. It was none of that. Enough years has passed, and my running is different over the years that, the next morning, knowing that I covered the 26 miles, I was sore, but I wasn't destroyed. So that was the next day was Monday, and I think I went for a run on Monday. I think. I think I went for a couple more runs in the week, and it's nice to get. Oh, I know what I did. What did I do? I think I went running on Monday, and then Tuesday I went on the spinner. I think that's what I did. Yeah. Then I went for a run on Wednesday. No, I didn't. I didn't, did I? I went for a run on Thursday. I think Wednesday I used my time to eat. I don't know. But, that's running. That's the running, and I had hoped I had hoped to get some running today. But I can't, because I have to get on a call on my lunch hour to chat with Lonnie and another guest for the service guys. So that ain't gonna happen, but something's gonna happen. So that's the run update, folks. Looking to register today for the Berkeley 50K, and lots to do. I got a lot of work to get done, so I need to head out, finish my coffee, and so thanks for listening. I'll catch you later. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Ruel's Running Podcast with Ruel. If you like what you just heard, share it with your friends and your enemies. Also, be sure to check out the site over at ruelsrunning.com. This has been another Coffee with Heavy Cream production. Join us next time for another silly show of Ruel's Running Podcast.